Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Conservative realism is very different. It wants a strong, vigorous, and as necessary, assertive America, yes. But unlike primativism, it also welcomes empowered and vigorous allies. Conservatism is all about a state recognizing its own proper limits and thus other entities' legitimate spheres for their own power and responsibility. In the domestic sphere, the principle of subsidiarity, and in the international sphere, a spirit of genuine partnership with other independent, vigorous states. Now, this approach creates an important role for diplomacy. Military force is, of course, the critical underlying source of our defense, but we cannot and should not seek to impose our will everywhere. Rather, a conservative government can and should look for ways to induce others to work with us, not simply dictate and browbeat. This overall approach gives a clear agenda for the next conservative administration in America. Grounded in both conservatism and realism, it's a foreign policy that would focus on the greatest challenges abroad to America, especially China's ability to dominate Asia.
America's Christmas present to the world, peace through strength, folks. Peace through strength. Welcome to Transition Tuesday, and the Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, X-Spaces simulcast, and Truth Social. So go follow us on Worldview Tube over there on Truth Social, please. Personnel is policy. That's it. That's the answer to the question of, will President Trump do what he said he would do on the campaign trail? We see his policies coming in focus through his nominations, especially in the Department of Defense. The Director of National Intelligence, his National Security Advisor, his White House Executive Team, and the Department of Health and Human Services. The show is focused on some breaking news in the national security appointments, and especially our ongoing coverage of the rank and file group's proposed nominees from the grassroots up. The man you just saw, Elbridge Colby, has been my guest on this show before and was just named as Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the number 3 job at the Pentagon. And he is Mr. Peace Through Strength, folks. Men and women of the Rank and File Project have also been seeing great results from our accountability effort even before the new administration takes office and joined the effort on Capitol Hill called Vets for Peace. We're going to get an update on that. And finally, Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to you all. My guest today is a leader among veterans demanding accountability and the Rank and File Project. Carolyn Rocco is an active duty Air Force officer working to keep leadership and courage as admired traits among those she works with while setting a great example. She is a signer of the Declaration of Military Accountability and lives every day. Carolyn, welcome to the Rob Maness Show. Let me read this disclaimer. Lieutenant Colonel Rocco's views or mine do not represent, nor are they endorsed by the Department of Defense or the Department of the Air Force or any other government yahoo out there. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's an honor to be here and good seeing you again.
Well, it's Christmas Eve, and we got to have a little bit of levity on this one, even though these are very serious Tuesdays these days.
They are.
Especially since you guys released your announcement about the rank and file folks in the process. So before we dive too deep into it, tell folks a little bit more about your background for us.
Sure. So I am a prior enlisted C-130 avionics maintainer. I love the air so much. I did an ROTC program where I was able to commission right into OSI, and I did that back in May of 2007. So I'm over 20 years. I actually have a one-fly retirement, but we'll see how things shape up in the DoD. I might be offered an opportunity to retract that and work for this next administration. So it's been a great time. But as we all have noted, the DoD has changed and not necessarily for the better. And so I would love to be a part of making it honorable and lethal again. So we shall see what the next couple of weeks will hold.
Yeah, and the man I had on the leading clip there, I had that for a couple of reasons. One is I have run on this policy change and lived it as a commander, and that is the endless war policies. And Mr. Colby is a staunch advocate of ending those endless war policies and returning to a peace through strength approach, more like under the Reagan administration, which had fantastic results. As we all know, the Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union disintegrated, Soviet communism is no longer much of a force on society in Russia, even though Russia's still got its problems. What does the rank and file think about this one? Have you heard from anybody? And your thoughts, too, on Mr. Colby being USD policy now?
Yeah, Colby, and he goes by Bridge. So there has been nothing but praise for his particular selection. And like you mentioned, it's the number 3 position in the DoD, and the peace through strength, ending the needless wars. In fact, Rand Paul ran on the same message back in 2016, to where, war is not the only solution. It's not saying that we become isolationist, and it's not saying that we don't support and provide trade agreements, but to build those nations. But our job as the United States, especially within the DoD, should not be to go build nations for the rest of the world. So we are excited for Bridge.
That's good. Yeah, especially through armed force, quite frankly. It's he gets a lot of heat, though, from the Atlantic Council people and the foreign policy the Department of State folks and those kind of things, because they say that we are isolationists because we want to return to this peace through strength concept. From your view, as a person that served and is, I could say, is still serving. Obviously, folks, Carolyn's not speaking for the Air Force; she's speaking in her own right. But from your view, you just said that it doesn't mean we're isolationists. Can you put a little more meat on that bone for folks to give them a better understanding? And then I'll weigh in with my own opinion.
Sure. I mean, I think in almost every conversation, people are labeling us, if you're not one thing, then you're automatically the total opposite. And doesn't mean, that to be anti-globalist doesn't mean that we're solely an isolationist or have an isolation mindset, meaning that only about the United States. Now, granted, I am America first. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of this country. I made a social contract basically with the American people, and that is my number 1 priority. But that does not mean that we live in our own little bubble, not taking into consideration world events. It just means we are not going to be the gatekeepers for the rest of the world. And we're not going to try to build nations, especially after what we just saw in Afghanistan. What started off as a go in and bad guys turned into a let's spend the next 20 years trying to make a country that is unlike our country mirrored to a country. And we have to realize that is not going to work. And the sooner we understand that concept and work with them, I'm not saying like we stay isolated, right? We have to work with our neighbors, but it doesn't mean that we give all of our resources. That includes people, money, time, and equipment. And especially if that means that we're the ones that suffer from it.
Yeah, I'll just put my 2 cents on that. It also doesn't mean that we don't work with our adversaries. As Bridge mentioned in the clip, we want our allies that are empowered and can act in their own right. We don't want client states like what we currently have in NATO, which is why President Trump and all of us that are on the realist side continue to hammer up your game. If you're really worried about Russia, NATO allies, get your damn spending up to 5% of your GDP. Every single one of you. Stop slacking, Canada. Stop slacking, because that's what you are. I'll just call you out, Mr. Neighbor to the north, that says a lot but does nothing because you have no muscle. You don't even have bones. You spend so little on your national defense. So if you want to be part of the team, we want you to be independent. We want you to be strong, and we want you to have a voice that's not afraid to challenge our voice even, but you got to do your part first. And if you're not doing your part, we're going to call you out on it. The other thing is working with our adversaries. Look, Ronald Reagan was a master at working with the Soviet leadership. As a matter of fact, if it had not been for his personal actions and personal interaction, I don't think the Soviet Union would have disintegrated when it did, or the Berlin Wall wouldn't have come down. So that's one of the things that Donald Trump does, that the foreign policy types, the Atlantic Council types, and those kind of people, just like they criticized Bridge Colby for his positions, they criticized Donald Trump and the rest of us because we acknowledge that. And here's the third thing that you didn't mention, but I hear a lot of whining about, well, the money that's going to Ukraine, it's all going to our defense contractors, and we got to keep giving the defense contractors money so that they stay in existence. Well, I got some truth for you, folks. During the Cold War, at the end of it, there were over 85 defense contractors. There are now only 5. Think about that. If we build back up to a position of peace through strength, you're going to have more defense contractors getting more money, which are employing more American people, which helps the American economy a lot more than this crazy position that we have now, where we're emptying our ammo dumps, we're emptying our training facilities because we're putting all the resources that we have into training for something that's never going to be a success anyway. And we can't even build 155 artillery shells enough to keep the Ukrainians in supply. And nobody can at this point, because we've let our manufacturing atrophy to such a point that the Chinese can build 340 merchant marine vessels to our one in a year. And it's incredible that we have to fix that. And that's what Bridge Colby represents. There's another name that came out. This list came out Sunday night for the DOD, Carolyn. I want to talk about it. It's the guy's name is, let's see here, Keith Bass for ASD, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. Now, he's going to be replacing the notorious Terry Aderim. Who is Terry Aderim?
So first, I believe Terry left that position maybe a year ago. She is not currently in that position, but she was in 2021. And why that is a pivotal year, especially for those of us who suffered through the unlawful COVID mandate. She is the one that penned a memo on 14 September 2021 after hearing, there was about a month, right? So the mandate came out in August. And when the mandate came out, it specified from both the SecDef and the service secretaries that a service member was to get an injection in a vaccine of an FDA approved, licensed, authorized product. There was no such thing. Granted, in theory, there was. August 23rd, the name Comirnaty came about, and all of us were like, what is this Comirnaty? None of us had heard of it. Nobody saw a label or a vial with Comirnaty label. And so there was some talk, and it must have gotten up to the ears of the Department of Defense, because middle of September, good old Terry Aderim decided to pen a memo saying that you can treat an EUA, an emergency use authorized product, a vaccine, as if it's an FDA approved vaccine. I don't know why she thought she had the authority to do that, but she did. And subsequently, commanders and JAGs and everybody used this one particular memo to basically force inject service members or kicked them out if they refused an EUA product. An EUA 10 U.S. Code 1107 Alpha resulted from the anthrax debacle. That is the statute that states that military members cannot be forced to take an EUA product, period. And unfortunately, as the picture shows here, there was even some back and forth with the Air Force top leaders saying, hey, this policy, this memorandum, there is some language in here that I think we're going to probably face some legal consequences from. But that advice and those suggestions that the Air Force provided were ignored, and the memo was signed and delivered to all of the services.
Wow. Well, I think Keith is a Navy commander, if I remember, or former Navy commander, if I remember President Trump's press release correctly. But before we go to the break here, I just want to point out, folks, that this woman, Terry Aderim, has just been made a senior executive service official, so that she's going to be in the civil service in the Trump administration. And Mr. Trump, your transition team needs to get rid of those people before you take before you sign an executive order, after you take the oath of office implement Schedule F and get rid of all these people, but your team needs to find them and find them now. We got to take a break, and we'll be right back. We're going to continue this discussion with Lieutenant Colonel Rocco and talk about some of our rank and file folks that have been in the news in the last couple of days that appear to be going up for some pretty good positions. So things are looking well. I'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
I got a personal question,
Yeah.
and it sounds like not a whole lot has changed from what you just said from the beginning to now. But I mean, being a veteran of the SEAL community, there is a lot of hearsay going on, about the newest product coming out of training, showing up to the teams.
Yeah.
Is today a more diluted product?
No, not yet. And that's part of why I'm here.
We're
I want
close.
to prevent that from ever happening. I have
Interesting.
concerns.
Well, we'll get into that, but for starters,
I'd offer. Let me just throw this out. The product that we are delivering to the American public, and this is something we'll get into as well. We very much view the American public as our customer. We are producing SEAL and SWCC warfighters. I say we are. I was for the American public. What we were delivering to the doorsteps of the SEAL teams and the boat teams, those guys run circles around what you and I were doing back in the day when we graduated. The program has grown, and this generation of warfighters that came to our front door, absolutely, they're just unstoppable. So I would offer, while the curriculum hasn't changed much for the core element, what we've added to it as far as qualification training, these guys are just and girls are absolutely phenomenal.
interesting.
Yeah.
That is very reassuring to hear, especially with where we're at in the world today.
Oh, this tour gave me hope in America's future. When I got to see these young Americans, America is still producing patriots, and they're still coming to our door and volunteering to do our program, which is very hopeful, very encouraging.
I love to hear that. I love to hear.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Transition Tuesday, and Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, America, and to our friends around the world. That was Captain Brad Geary in an interview he did with Sean Ryan of the Sean Ryan Show not too long ago. That was the great part of the interview that I really wanted to play and get documented in this show, because Captain Geary, in spite of what I'm about to tell you, stands in the breach and answers the question honestly. We are still able to produce patriotic, competent warfighters in the Navy Special Warfare Program. Go into SEAL training, the boat guys, and all of that. And that is really good news. I had said something to that effect, that the combat operators are probably still in a position where they can go out and fight and win. But not everybody in the military is, because we've lost our meritocracy by and large due to DEI. And my guest today is Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Carolyn Rocco, who is a member of the Rank and File Group and a signer of the Declaration of Military Accountability. And Carolyn, Brad Geary is on your list of potential nominees for the Rank and File, and you could see why in that interview. And tell folks what the Navy tried to do to him, though.
Well, for those who have time, he did do a 6 hour long interview with Sean Ryan on the Sean Ryan show. But they essentially set him up. He was the commandant commander. I know Navy has different terminology of the SEAL training out in California, and one of the trainees died. There was some finagling with the official NCIS report that basically removed the evidence that showed his death was likely due to performance enhancement drugs. And Brad had to basically fight, no kidding, for his life and his livelihood when he found out that the report was actually missing key evidence that would essentially exonerate him. So he has been through a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and those charges have been dismissed. And if you go to that Sean Ryan show site, on Sean's site, there's a great clip of him. It's about 6 minutes long of Sean. Actually, they gave him the letter first, he says, in the clip from the admiral that dismissed the charges. So God is good, folks. A lot of prayers were answered because Brad Geary is an important American as we move forward. I know you may not have ever heard his name before, but he's up for, according to the media, we can't say it for sure in official circles, but according to the media, he's up for a pretty big position in the Department of Defense, isn't he, Carolyn?
He is. So word on the street is that he is being considered for, it's called the Assistant Secretary of Defense SOLIC, so Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict. And that is obviously a key important position, especially for the special operations community. And I honestly can't think of a more honorable, somebody who has demonstrated integrity and character especially throughout the ordeal that he has endured the last couple years. So no better pick, which is why he did make it to our rank and file. He's one of the 18 that were nominated to serve in the next administration. And again, it's not my personal list. We asked people to nominate folks, whether it was themselves or other warriors that they saw demonstrate the true characteristics that we need to have back in our military leadership. And Brad Geary is definitely one of the top guys that we were excited to hear this quote unquote rumor in the news that he is being considered for that position.
Yeah, I've never met Brad, but I have watched the Sean Ryan show interview, and he is a hell of a man and a hell of an American, and we'll be doing well to get him in that job because that job has an Iranian mole. As I think still the senior civilian, that Robert Malley, who was removed from his security clearance process because he was an Iranian agent. We believe that mole is still in that position. So Brad's going to be walking into that if he gets the job. And there's no better person to be able to handle that in a professional manner if that situation still exists. And it's a critically important one going forward with all the mess with Afghanistan and all around the world, quite frankly. And he's got some house cleaning to do down in the services, special operations programs. If those people that went after him are still in any position, then they've got to be removed from those positions and held accountable. So I look forward to that. And here's why it's important, folks. You've heard about the blue on blue shoot down of one F-18 by the USS Gettysburg in the Red Sea. But the news broke this morning that there was a second engagement for an F-18 that same evening with the USS Gettysburg as they were trying to land on the aircraft carrier. And that aircraft was saved because of aggressive defensive maneuvering when the missile was shot at it. I mean, that can't underline the importance of having competency in a meritocracy hiring and training system in the United States Armed Forces than something like that, can it? Because a whole bunch of mistakes, as I said on my show yesterday, had to occur, and bad decisions really had to occur for that shoot down to happen. And now we find out there was a second one. And of course, they delayed reporting that. Your thoughts?
What can you say, right? How does this happen? And again, I don't want to make any assumptions, and so I will probably keep my comments short. But it's unreal. Everybody's talking about this. There are mechanisms in place for these types of events to not happen. So there were multiple failures up and down the chain. So we shall see what comes of this. I think part of what our culture, our military culture, has seen over the last couple of decades is, again, lack of accountability. People make, and I'm not saying it's a one mistake, you make a mistake and you're out the door, but significant mistakes like this, they need to be dealt with appropriately.
Especially at the senior officer level, which is why you and I both signed the Declaration of Military Accountability, because the senior officers in the COVID vaccine mandate thing could have stopped it. The senior officers in accepting the policy to move from a meritocracy to an equity-based, DEI-based accession program, retention programs, and flight programs, everything. It infects everything. Right. And when you do that, you're accepting people with less qualifications than others that are competing together. And in the military, we have to put the best in these positions, and it's the senior officers really that have made these decisions that need to be held accountable. In my day, I think the entire chain of command would have been relieved at this point. Probably long ago, a day ago or so, right after it happened. The first reports of it came out after the initial reporting of the incident and the rescuing of the aviators. But that doesn't seem to be happening. This is a second big incident that I talked about on my show. The first one was in my own old community, the B-1 bomber that crashed on the runway at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. The crews were held accountable, but I didn't see any accountability moves up the chain of command on that. So, generally, there are some pretty big firings that happen, and we don't appear to have that. And that just tells me that there's still a weakness and a rot up at the top of the chain of command. Mark Milley's interview on 60 Minutes that just came out is just absolutely horrendous when we see him talk about how he hid Joe Biden's dementia from the American people and blatantly lied, and he comes from institutions where they don't tolerate liars, or supposed to not, and they don't lie, and they lie to the American people. So this is really horrendous that that we have this rot, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's probably one of the most difficult things for service members to comprehend, is that we are brought up on day one with the core values, right? You just mentioned integrity, honor, courage, and we expect everybody who serves, who wears a uniform, that they would live by those standards. And so when you know that your own chain of command really has little regard, if any regard, for the words that come out of their mouth, there is a moral injury that occurs. And I don't think people understand the depth of that type of injury has affected tens and thousands of service members as we continue to see, folks acting in ways that do not uphold the core values. And in some instances, the Constitution that we took an oath to support and defend.
And those are really the ones that we need to get the next administration to take a look at, the folks that are not upholding the Constitution, where they should be doing that, especially when it comes to taking care of the troops. I think that's the part that really hurts my heart the most, is that our institution has learned lessons from things like the anthrax vaccine program that had to be stopped. And we have thousands of disabled veterans in that program. And everything, and it's just incredibly sad that those lessons weren't applied in this other vaccine mandate, and it's resulted in all these, tens of thousands of people that have lost their careers, people that have died, people that are severely injured, and the institutions still aren't acknowledging that. Well, we got to take another break, Carolyn. And when we come back, we're going to dive some more into the rank and file and talk about some other names we've heard in the news about that are on the list of 18. And it's good news, too. And some more of these shenanigans that we're seeing from places inside the Department of Defense. We'll be right back on The Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
So we're here with a veterans group led by Jordan Carr, former captain. Can you tell us what's going on, Ms. Carr?
We are at the Senate, at the Capitol, advocating for Pete Hegseth with about 20 different senators. And it's two groups of us, veterans, all different branches, enlisted officer. All of us have our own personal testimony as to why we're advocating for Pete.
Excellent.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Transition Tuesday, and we're talking with Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Carolyn Rocco, who is a member of the ad hoc group, the rank and file, a signer of the Declaration of Military Accountability. And Carolyn, this group went up to the Pentagon or Capitol Hill to talk to the senators about the Secretary of Defense nominee. We just heard in the clip there from Jordan Carr, who's been on this show before, and folks are very familiar with from the DMA's perspective and the COVID vaccines perspective. Tell us about that group that went up to the Hill to talk to these senators and their staffs about Mr. Hegseth, and what was the makeup of the group? Who'd y'all talk to?
Sure. So the group was formed by Stu Scheller. He put out a call probably about two and a half weeks ago, wanting to get a group of veterans who were obviously in support of Pete Hegseth to join him on the Capitol to talk to a select couple senators and or their staff. And so there was 18 of us that met last Wednesday. And we had, like you heard in the video, we had two groups. A group, I was with Stu, Jordan was with Ivan. In fact, she was also with Steve Simmons, who is also one of the 18 nominated on our rank and file list. And we met with just under 30 senators and or their staffs. And we really just wanted to show face. We wanted to make sure they understood that there is a large group of veterans who fully support Pete Hegseth. We had a printed executive summary that we gave those staff members, and then we talked with passion of why the status quo can no longer continue, right? We cannot continue to have 4-star generals who are coming in or going to, corporations, Raytheon, for example, General Dynamic, for example, because they at some point, and this is my opinion, have lost touch with the rank and file, have lost touch with the actual service members who are spending, long days, weekends, deployments, missed birthdays, anniversaries. And we need somebody like Pete who has lived it and has lived it recently. Pete obviously also has the lethality, the promoting people based on their ability to do the job. He has mentioned accountability several times. And I would even go so far to say him as a victim of, this, if you will, I don't want to say white rage, but this discrimination because of the cross that he had on his chest. He was put on orders, if I'm remembering his interview with on the Sean Ryan show, to do the Biden inauguration, and whoever reported it, and then he was pulled off of orders because it was, a symbol, a cross on his chest that I guess didn't didn't meet the muster. And so he was then pulled off of orders. And we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing, and again, I can speak personally for the COVID mandate, how we literally kicked out 8,700 and disenfranchised about 90,000 more, primarily because of their ability to know what a lawful order is. But then I would even go so far to say because of their religious belief, leaning more towards the Christian religion.
Yeah. So, how many senators did you talk to? About 20 or so? Their offices anyway?
We had scheduled about 20, and we did some impromptu walk-bys and drive-bys. And so we were able to contact, I would say 27, 28 in total.
And the feedback?
Amazing.
In general?
Really? It was
positive. They were all... Did you meet with any of the known opposition at all, or suspected opposition?
We wanted to. The key ones, we were not able to get a set schedule, so we ensured that we at least swung by their office and dropped off our executive summary, and anybody who was in the office that's willing to listen to us speak for a couple minutes, we took advantage of that opportunity. But at the end of the day, we even swung by a couple, again, this cannot be a partisan issue. So we swung by a couple Democrat offices as well, and we're actually receptive in those offices too, saying, hey, they're willing to listen to what happens on January 14th at Pete's confirmation hearing.
Well, that's great news. That really is great news. And look, these groups, you guys all came together at one time. And everything, and we're pleased by that. You're part of the COVID mandate group. As far as folks that have been hurt by the DEI process and those kind of things, they're all coming together at once. You have the same viewpoint on accountability and what the problems and the challenges are going forward that need to be addressed. Did you guys find any commonality there?
We blended and became best friends almost immediately because at the end of the day, the root cause is not COVID. The root cause is not DEI. The root cause is not Afghanistan. Those are all symptoms of an institution that has lost its way in doing what's right, doing what is lawful. And so immediately we were able to put our personal experiences to the side and understand the bigger picture and the bigger problem. And I think that was probably the most amazing part of this is some of us had never met before. And literally within the first 5 minutes after introductions, we were rocking and rolling as if we've been doing this for the last 10 years. And so that's one of the benefits, again, as I look back on my military experience. I feel like the institution has trained all of us for moments like this, right? The joint operations, the ability to negotiate and communicate and identify and meet an objective, a strategic goal. And it was obvious that we all share that same vision amongst, the group of us that did have different personal backgrounds. Like I said, Stu Scheller, he was punished and fired and even jailed for making comments about the Afghanistan withdrawal, demanding accountability. And granted, he did that in uniform, which, obviously has consequences. So outside of that, we had a couple folks who suffered the COVID mandate as well as the DEI. So again, we were one voice with one objective. And that objective is we need accountability and we need to end the status quo. We need people such as Pete Hegseth to lead our Department of Defense.
Yeah, and another name on our list, I say our because I might be on your list too, but another name on the list of 18 came up in the media too, and that is Joe Kent. What's going on with him that we take to know about?
So he, as of yesterday, was selected to sit on ODNI, which is huge. So Joe Kent, he ran for Congress, prior special forces guy in Washington State. He ran for Congress twice. Unfortunately, he also was married to service member, essentially, Shannon, who died in combat. And so he, again, has personal experience of these endless wars and what it can do, to families. And so his experience, as well as his insight, I think is going to do wonders again for our country in this next administration. So that's number 2 out of 18 who have, and assume that Brad Geary, is officially offered a position, that would be 2 out of 18. And I feel like, we've only just begun. So.
Yeah, if you're mentioned in the media, that's a good sign that that's more than likely that something's going on that's going to result in at least a final decision. You're going to be part of that final decision, I think. So yeah, I think it's interesting and a pretty good record, really, quite frankly. 2 out of the first 18. That's incredible, and I'm glad to hear that Joe Kent might be on the DNI landing team. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, Carolyn, is Ryan Swayze's on our list too, on your list too, I think. And he's got a program where he thinks the IG situation is in bad shape. Go ahead and play clip 3 for me, Reagan.
Charges. 6th, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee, so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. 7th, I will.
That's President Trump right there, and Ryan's program, his effort, his line of effort, so to speak, is to advocate for separate Inspector General's offices across the board, especially in the Department of Defense, right? Because we've seen problems when folks go to the IG. The IG is basically protecting the institution instead of taking care of the problem and investigating it properly. Is that accurate?
That's right. That is 100% accurate. So Ryan Swayze, a good friend of mine, actually suffered reprisal. He was also on a fast track to likely become a general. Definitely in 2006, he was a lieutenant colonel at the time and saw some wrongdoings, made a formal and official IG complaint, and his next OPR, his annual performance report, after being stratified, number 1, number 2, number 1, there was absolutely no stratification. And that sends a huge message to his promotion board. So he knew his career had ended, and he knew it was because he made an official IG complaint. So he retired and immediately started a foundation called Walk the Talk Foundation. His whole objective is to make the IG independent, because every IG is basically reporting to their boss. And so if somebody files a complaint against the boss, the IG is, there is no separation there. And oftentimes that complaint either is ignored, unsubstantiated. I know for COVID, there were multiple DoD IG complaints that literally were still not closed before those service members were kicked out. And so again, we, in many different avenues, the trust in these systems within the Department of Defense has disappeared. And Ryan, he didn't take his ball and go home and cry. He's like, we've got to fix this. And he has been a staunch advocate for an independent IG system. And so he is the primary reason, or his effort is the primary reason we have him as one of our 18 nominated folks to serve in the next administration. And it sounds like this is something that President Trump supports as well.
Yeah, obviously he does. And I think that's great. I hope that Swayze is in the mix there like the other guys are. Man, that's incredible. The other thing is that's going on with this group is the impacts that it's having before President Trump gets into office. I mean, President Trump is hailed as being a president before he's into office is having an impact around the world already with his potential policies and everything. But this group and Rob Green, U.S. Navy Commander Rob Green, broke the news that the U.S. Navy's JAG, what is it, Admiral French?
Vice Admiral.
Vice Admiral French resigned and retired 92 days after he took office. What do we think is going on with that?
I think he sees the writing on the wall. I think he realizes that whatever shenanigans he was involved with, whether it was advising on the COVID policy, whether it was advising Milley, whether it was his role as the 7th Fleet JAG, that over his time serving in that capacity overlapped with the Fat Leonard scandal. And so I think he's seeing certain people be put in positions that are no nonsense folks who are definitely going to demand and go after accountability. And so perhaps he thinks slipping into retirement will keep him safe. It does seem kind of weird, you know, after you pick up your 3rd star to after 3 months say, maybe this isn't for me. I have a feeling there's going to be more that comes from that. And I do need to point out that Rob Green, of all of the folks nominated, and again, we have a stellar list, but people need to understand he was able to break that story first. And by the way, there's only been one official news outlet that has broken it since. It has been hush, hush, quiet since early December. And one would maybe ask themselves, why and how does Rob Green, how do people like Sam Shoemate, who used to go by Terminal CWO, how do these people get this type of information before the main news outlets? And one of the reasons, in my opinion, is because they have shown and demonstrated their ability to do the right thing. And so they therefore are trustworthy. And that is, this is a perfect example of why the people that are at least on this first list of rank and file nominees, it's because of their character. They all have the skill set as well. But the most important thing is they have those key leadership skills that seem to be void in today's Department of Defense.
And that's the bottom line, Carolyn. Well, we got to take our last break. When we come back, though, we're going to talk about Christmassy stuff. And we'll show a clip from some great airmen and some Christmas music. We'll be right back with Carolyn Rocco here on the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube Live.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at www.foundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times, lens of a Christian worldview.
Underneath the
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Transition Tuesday, and we're talking about all things transition, except for this segment. We're going to dedicate to Christmas and Hanukkah. Merry Christmas from the great airmen of the German Air Force. I know that sounded like an American band singing that song, and it was wonderful. That's why I had to play it. But, you know, in Air Forces around the world, airmen have a special bond. Even when we are adversaries, there has always been a special bond between the airmen, whether it's in peace or war. So I just thought they did a great job on that. And my guest is Carolyn Rocco. She's an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and prior enlisted service member herself, and has been talking with us about the rank and files projects and accountability today on the transition side. And Carolyn, I always do a part of my show at Christmas time for talking about veterans nonprofits, and because I'm on the board of a couple, and I like to give a shout out to them and an opportunity to that. But you have a story that I want you to tell the folks before we dive into a little bit about nonprofits that I think you should tell it, and I appreciate it if you would tell it about your dad.
Okay. So today actually marks the 2-year anniversary of his passing. He died at Christmas Eve of 2022. And obviously, it's a day that we'll remember, not because it's Christmas Eve, but because of his death. But one of the things leading up to his death, and even I would say years prior, so he was diagnosed with leukemia, and he also being treated, going through the Veterans Hospital, likely result of being exposed to Agent Orange. So that obviously digs deep, especially when I was then faced with the COVID mandate, knowing that, whether through the air or through injections or through, material that we're exposed to, that we are not fully safe. And not only, was my dad obviously upset about his medical condition, he also understood that serving, so obviously exposed to in Vietnam, understood there was really reason for us to be over there. So again, kind of circling back to, starting the segment with Bridge, peace through strength, and not always engaging in war. War is not always the answer. And so, this is kind of a shout out to him. I'm glad I was able to mention him. Thank you for the opportunity. But yeah, Vietnam vets have a special place in my heart, obviously, because my dad was one, but some of the most courageous and unvalued members, I think, that our nation has seen. So to the Vietnam.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for telling that story. And the Agent Orange victims have a special place in my heart. I'm on the board of directors, or I was until this year. So I guess I'm emeritus now, or whatever that word is, for Military Veterans Advocacy Incorporated, folks. You can find them at mvadvocacy.org. And that organization came into being about toxic exposure. It fought and won the battle for the U.S. Navy folks that had been removed from Agent Orange benefits because they didn't have boots on the ground, but they were on ships off the coast of North and South Vietnam, where all this Agent Orange was dumped. MV Advocacy was created to help get their benefits back. It took them over 10 years to do it. They finally won a court case. It's the only group. The reason I agreed to be on the board and serve as its executive director for several years is because it's the only group that has actually taken the VA to court and won on specific benefits issues like this. And it resulted in the Blue Water Navy bill legislation finally being passed, and they submitted that bill every Congress for over 10 years and walked the halls of Congress. These guys in wheelchairs, on crutches, canes, can barely walk, got diabetes and all kinds of stuff. Leukemia is one, ischemic heart disease. These are men and some wives that were able to get that job done, and so they're the Agent Orange benefits protectors of lots of widows and kids and service members that are still alive. And then we got the opportunity to write a large portion of the PACT Act, working with the Wounded Warrior Project Team Coalition, because of our expertise in toxic exposure benefits and winning on those. And we got a lot of new presumptive conditions put in there. So, folks, if you want to make a donation, that's one group that I'd like to give a shout out to, mvadvocacy.org. It's worth every single penny. Of course, it's tax deductible and all that stuff. Do you have any veterans charities that are your favorites, Carolyn, that you want to talk about?
You know, you put me on the spot. I don't have any off the top of my head. But I am a fan of Feds for Freedom and Children's Health Defense and all of those. But those are not specific to military veterans. So I'll have my homework.
Wait a minute. There's a Children's Health Defense military chapter, right?
There is.
Aren't you a part of that?
I am.
Well,
yep.
That sounds like a charity to me. Let's talk about that for a second before we close this show.
Sure. So we started the military chapter in October of 2023. So we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary not too long ago. We've already had a conference. It was a full day in Orange, Virginia. We had some pretty well-known doctors and advocates come out and speak. In fact, Casey Dixon, who is our spokesperson for the rank and file, and you just interviewed her a couple weeks ago. She came out and was on one of the panels. We had Dr. Malone, Dr. Shack, just a ton of great people providing amazing information. And we're looking to do it again sometime in 2025. So be on the lookout. But yeah, and it's not just about vaccines, right? It's the mold in the dorms. Mm-hmm. It's exposure. You know, we've got the Red Hill, Hawaii gasoline incident that Mandy Feint is probably the main figurehead for speaking on that incident. So, we need to take care of our service members. If we don't, we're not going to have a strong military and therefore not a strong country.
That's right. And Children's Health Defense is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s organization that he started a long time ago. And he's going to be secretary of HHS because he will get confirmed, folks. There's one more organization I want to give a shout out to get it on the record here. It's called Code of Vets. You can follow it at X at Code of Vets. It's Gretchen Smith is the leader of that. She is fantastic. I've seen her work up close and personal, folks. If you want to help organizations and get a tax deduction, and Christmas time and New Year's is the time to do that, help out Code of Vets. Their mission is to get direct help to veterans that are in dire need. Usually some of them are living in their cars and they were able to get money to get them into an apartment, or they're about to lose their home and they're able to get enough money collected to get them set on the right path so they don't, and those kind of things. At Code of Vets, or just type in Gretchen Smith in the search bar on X, you can find it. But she's fantastic too. And mvadvocacy.org. And what's the website for Children's Health Defense?
It's MIL, M-I-L, and then children'shealthdefense.org. Okay.
And you're on X at what, Carolyn? Because you're on X too?
Yep. KROW 121812.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with me today and spending Christmas. Christmas Eve is a time for people to get together on a show, but this one was important, and Carolyn agreed to do it for me. So thank you so much, folks, and thank you for the rank and file and the Children's Health Defense and the Declaration of Military Accountability signers and authors and everybody that's striving for one thing, to make America strong again so that we have peace instead of these endless wars, and we serve with honor and dignity. And that's what it's all about. So Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I will see you January 2nd on Truth Thursday. This is it. Bye-bye.